Let's bring this meeting to order of, see, what is it now? October 21st, 2025. If you'll all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. Thank you. Okay, if I could have the translators come up, or translator, and introduce yourself.
Hi, so just a brief bilingual announcement, un mensaje breve bilingüe. Tenemos interpretación simultánea disponible entre el inglés y el español. Si quieren escuchar todo lo que se va a presentar en español, tengo algunos auriculares disponibles para que lo puedan hacer. Me pueden dejar saber, alzar la mano o pueden pasar al cuarto lateral donde estaremos puestos. So we have simultaneous interpretation available between Spanish and English for today's meeting. If you would like to follow along in Spanish, listening to everything that will be presented in Spanish, we have some listening devices available for you to do so. You can raise your hand, let me know if you'd like to do that, or you can always visit us in the room next door where we'll be working. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. And we haven't done roll call yet. We do roll call, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Here.
Councilmember Kiriakou is absent. Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Aye, or here.
And Mayor Perotti.
I'm here. Thank you. Okay, at this time, we'll have public forum. Anybody that wishes to speak to anything that's not on our agenda this evening, please do so.
Yes, I do have one speaker slip. For those of you on the Zoom webinar, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. Our first in-person speaker is April Reed.
You're ready.
Go ahead, April.
The following are just some of the misstatements I was told by the City Council and staff for Kenwood Village and the rules they would not comply with. 1, I was told by staff the City Council would not vote to build on Kenwood Village, so I was deprived of the opportunity to participate in the original CEQA. There should be a required updated CEQA if the public was not allowed to participate in the original, especially if the original has misstatements. 2, I was told by Councilmember Kasdan that the public would have the opportunity to participate in the CEQA contents at the project level. He also wrote an article to that effect. He also said the City Council would have the chance to vote on any project the size of Kenwood Village. None of those things seem to be happening. 3, I was told by Councilmember Kiriakou there would be a chance to stop building on Kenwood if there was a building on Shelby, which is now happening. Kenwood still seems to be moving forward, though. 4, I was told by Kathy Allen that the city would not require the developer to fix the flooding on the property that runs onto Baker Lane, a private street. The flooding on the property was 1 to 3 feet deep a full 3 days after the rain. So apparently I'm supposed to fix the flooding that was done by the Kenwood Village property, and you guys aren't going to do anything about it. Even if the members of the public don't mind being misled regarding housing, there may be something in the future they do care about that the council and the staff will mislead them about. So don't say you weren't warned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have no further speaker slips and no one has their hands up, so that concludes.
Okay, then I'm going to close public forum, excuse me, and entertain amendments or adjustments to the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. We don't have any adjustments tonight, but I can move to CM updates because I do have several.
Sure.
If that's okay?
Please.
Sure. So I'm going to start with acknowledging our finance department, and I do see Luke Rio in the back there. The city and our finance department were awarded the Government Finance Officers Association Award for our end of the year comprehensive financial report. We also get a similar award for our budget that the council adopts each year, our 2-year budget. And this is the 21st year that the city has earned this prestigious award. The Certificate of Achievement is the highest form of recognition in government accounting and financial reporting. Its attainment represents a significant accomplishment, confirming that the city's report was judged by an impartial panel to meet the program's high standards. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Sometimes that flies under the radar, but Luke's here tonight, and I'm probably surprising him, but I just wanted to let that be known that we did receive that.
Thank you. Good job. Okay.
Next, I just want to acknowledge that the Goleta Valley Library Express is still up and running. It's going pretty smoothly, and that's going to be there for a couple years. But one of the comments we heard kind of coming out of the gate, and over time, obviously, people are finding it, but hard to find. People got used to the Goleta Library. And so they have installed new signs. I think those signs just went up recently. I'm reading off the script here. 4 bright yellow and blue lawn signs have been installed at the Goleta Valley Library Express to help with visibility. And they're saying we're receiving fewer queries from patrons and members of the public on how to get to the library. So that's been very helpful, and those signs should be up now. So I just wanted to announce that. And then third, a couple meetings ago, the council adopted improvements and changes to our tenant protection ordinance, and those actually went into effect October 17th, so just this past week. And one of the requests that came from council was to put on a community meeting for both tenants and landlords, kind of an educational meeting to get the word out and to take questions and to be engaged with both tenant and landlords on what the ordinance means and where to get assistance, et cetera, et cetera. So that has been scheduled. There's going to be more information coming out about that. But November 5th at noon, it's virtual. And so we'll get the word out for that. And that's, again, for the entire community, tenants and landlords. And then finally, my last announcement is we do have a city's, well, I guess the final one of the year, of the calendar year, Coffee and Community. It's this coming Sunday, November 2nd at 10 a.m. And it'll be at the Stowe House Ranch Yard. The mayor, Paula Perotti, and Councilmember Luz Reyes-Martin will be there, and they invite the community to come to enjoy free coffee and pastries and take part in some crafts for the kids. The Goleta Valley Library Book Van will also be there, and it's a fun way to visit the Stowe House, see a couple council members and the mayor, ask questions, and see what the city's up to. So with that, that concludes all my remarks.
I just want to clarify, it's the following Sunday, not
Following
this coming Sunday.
Correct.
You're so excited about it.
know.
November 2nd.
2 Sundays, November 2nd,
Yeah.
10 o'clock. That's it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the goats will be available too? Oh, yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There will be goats.
There will be goats. And fun. All right, moving on to consent.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. That will be item A1, approval of the City Council meeting minutes of September 16, 2025, and the City Council meeting minutes of October 7, 2025. Item A2, acceptance of the August 2012 investment transaction report. Item A3, ad hoc legislative issues committee. Item A4, amendments to professional services agreements with Union Pacific Railroad for the San Jose Creek Multipurpose Path Project, CIP number 9006, and with M&S Engineers, Inc. for the 2025 arterial pavement project. Item A5, authorizing to advertise construction bid for the Goleta Community Center Skylight Replacement Project. And item A6, authorization to directly negotiate purchase of replacement parking enforcement vehicle.
Okay. Any, council wish to pull any item from consent? No? Okay. Do we have any speakers on consent calendar?
Any member of the public who wishes to speak to a consent item, please use the raise hand icon and I will call on you. And I'm seeing none, Mayor.
Okay, great. Then we'll move on to the next item. Oh, we have to vote on it. That's right.
Motion and a vote,
Who would
please.
like to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Councilmembers do lock in your votes. Councilmember Reyes Martin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou is absent. Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Aye.
And Mayor Perotti.
Aye. Okay, the ayes have it. I think I was just getting excited for the next presentation.
And that is item B1, Goleta School of Ballet Business Recognition Award.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, I can kick this one off.
Okay, please.
The Business Recognition Program is a relatively new program. It was approved by the City Council in July 2024. But prior to that, of course, we did a strategic plan, took a year and a half, vetted through our Economic Development Committee, Councilmember Reyes Martin, Councilmember Kiriakou, and out of that came this program. And so the program is intended to highlight exceptional Goleta businesses for their notable achievements and unique contributions to the community. Recognition may be based on factors such as longevity, economic development, prosperity, sustainability, resilience, or other efforts that promote ongoing community enrichment. This is the second award. The first was done maybe 8 months ago, and that business was kind of camera shy, and so that award was not done at a council meeting, but it was done. And this is the second one. And under the program guidelines, nominations are open to the public. It's citywide. Self-nominations are encouraged. Businesses can submit their own business. Nominations may be submitted at any time through an online form and are intended to be given on a quarterly basis, depending on nominations. However, recipients are selected by city staff in consultation with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce. So we're very excited for this to be the second award. I'm not going to steal the thunder about who it is. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mayor, and I'll also acknowledge Shannon Kern from the City Manager's Office who staffs this program.
Well, thank you all. I'm so excited that we're doing this. You know, it came to my attention several years ago that we seem to only recognize people, businesses that were going out of business or leaving. And I said, but we have so many businesses that are thriving and doing so well. Why aren't we recognizing them as well? And we all talked about it, and yes. So I'm glad this person, who is the artistic director, Lisa Absher, I'm glad you're not camera shy, and you're here today. And I'd like, if you could walk up, I'd like to present you with a certificate. They'll be able to all come up and say a few words if they want to, and to take pictures. And but thank you for being here. And I'll read it. The City of Goleta Business Recognition Award, the second one. This certificate is proudly presented to Goleta School of Ballet, honoring the school's nearly 4 decades of service to the community and successes as a woman-owned enterprise. Awarded on this 21st day of October 2025, signed by myself, Mayor Paula Perotti, and City Manager Robert Nisbet. So thank you so much. So here you go. You want to take a picture and then picture with all of them?
I'm really honored to get this award. I'm sorry, it means so much to me because I've been teaching ballet forever. And in Old Town Goleta, I started fall of October 1986. And the month before that, the Goleta Valley Community Center was advertising for a ballet teacher. And my mother-in-law, who had like an employment agency, goes, I think you should go and apply for that job. I go, I don't know. I should just keep concentrating on the family, you know, but I'll go. And I walked down the hallway and they said, well, you'll be able to run this program how you want, which was really music to my ears. And you can use this room or you could choose that room. And we've got this big auditorium. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a go. And throughout the years of raising my family and building the ballet school, it was such a privilege. We're right there where Rainbow School is and the Boys and Girls Club. So it was a real big hub for families. You could have, my son was over at the Boys Club and Rainbow School, while my daughter was there with me at ballet class. And it was very, very fun to be going through those years there. But then I've always wanted my own place. And so in 2011, Bob Morgan, who has been in Goleta forever, his family owns the building that's on the corner of Magnolia and Gaviota. He put a sign up for rent. It had been a Napa Auto Parts. That business went under. And we went in there and it was like, oh my God. It was like oil everywhere. It was just not a ballet school. My husband said, you're nuts. But my daughter says, no, we got vision. And she designed the whole thing. We built it out. We walked all of the portable bars that were at the Goleta Valley Community Center in room 8, all the way through the streets of Goleta to Magnolia, all of the upper level students. And we built in floors and walls, and every day I go there since then, I am so happy that it's mine. And I've been able to teach all these years, and it's been very special. And the students I brought with you, you know, these are pandemic kids. And they were in my backyard 5 years ago taking ballet class. And they stuck with ballet. We went back into the studio the next year, and they've worked really hard. And they're what I consider my upper level kids. And I asked them, well, would you guys like to come do that? No hesitation. But I really appreciate this because it's, in turning 71 soon, it does kind of affirm why I keep doing it, because I love it. And the school has been thriving for years. And I appreciate that you recognize that. And to be the second one to receive this award is very special to me too. Like I was saying earlier, well, you know, the Independent comes out with their Best of Santa Barbara, and you know, it seems like such a popularity contest, and the best dance studio here, the best ballet company there, but I'm a business recognition award. And that's not a popularity contest. That's something we're put a lot of years in, and I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, those of you on the Zoom webinar wish to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I'm seeing none, Mayor.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you'll all be in the holiday parade, right? Dancing down the street, maybe?
We're doing the Nutcracker.
Oh, you'll be busy. Okay, Nutcracker. They're in the Nutcracker. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. That is item C1, California Housing Laws presentation.
Mr. Rosen.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor and council members. So this evening we have with us one of my colleagues and one of our sort of foremost housing experts at the firm, Ryan Steger, who's going to be getting set up here in just a minute. The purpose of tonight's item is really to provide an overview to council of some of the recent changes that have come down from the state legislature in recent years and what that means for how the city considers, reviews, and approves housing projects, and should hopefully be sort of an informative 30,000-foot overview of some of those recent changes. So once my colleague is set up, Ryan will provide a PowerPoint to the council before sort of asking for questions and additional insight.
Would you like us to hold off with questions till the presentation's over, or is there a preference?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think it may be best to hold questions just to move through the items. Some of the components of the presentation interact with each other, so it's possible that there may be some feedback that may impact the specific question.
Great. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mayor, council members. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, my name is Ryan Steger. I'm an attorney with Best Vest and Krieger and specialize in housing law issues. And as Isaac said, we'll be providing this evening's presentation on kind of the evolving legal landscape that we've been seeing come out of Sacramento, especially in the last 8 years or so. So then that's the slide. Okay, perfect. All right, so as is no secret, it's been well documented, the state is experiencing a shortage of affordable housing. And this bill cited here on the slide, the legislature determined that the shortfall currently is at 3.5 million homes and counting. And in part, the legislature has attributed this state of affairs to restrictive local zoning, land use, and burdensome permitting processes. And as a consequence of that, the legislature has been very busy, especially in the last 5 years or so. And some common themes that we'll go through in a little more detail in a bit, but that we've been seeing out of Sacramento recently are bills that restrict cities' traditional ability to review, delay, or the discretion to review, delay, or deny housing projects. And that's showing up with increased opportunities for applicants to deviate from local standards and more ways and laws that are requiring the city to review things administratively at a staff level if projects qualify and comply with objective standards. So the first group of laws that we've been seeing more and more of recently are laws that require what's referred to as streamlined ministerial approval. And just so everyone's kind of operating from the same foundation, this is a process where it's nearly always at the staff level, and the city reviews the application and makes a determination, but that determination involves no personal judgment. It's really does this project qualify under the statute? Does it check the applicable objective standards that the statute lays out? But traditionally, with a lot of approvals, I guess historically, there would be findings that would ask, is this compatible? Is this harmonious? Does this blend with the surrounding neighborhood? If a project is submitted under a state streamlined ministerial statute, in that instance, the state has said those are not standards that apply. Really, the cities throughout the state are looking at what are referred to as objective standards. So, is height X feet or lower? Is setback, Y feet or less? Standards where reasonable minds can't differ. It's get out the tape measure. Does it comply? Does it not? And very recently, this last June, the state, as part of the governor's budget trailer bills, established a new floor. Or a new requirement rather, where any project that is submitted under a ministerial streamlining statute must be approved or denied within 60 days of the city's receipt of a completed application. So if the application is incomplete, obviously staff timely notifies an applicant, hello, you're missing these things from our checklist. But if an application is complete when submitted, the clock starts when the complete application is submitted to the city. And the state has set a 60-day deadline for qualifying projects to either be approved or denied when submitted. So the next couple slides, I have listed a number of statutes that have been recently adopted that require streamlined ministerial approval. I will warn you, each one is unique. Many are very technical, include detailed requirements, a lot of exceptions and exceptions to exceptions. So, kind of the scope of the next two slides is really to highlight for the council some of the more notable recent laws that have come out of Sacramento that utilize this streamlined ministerial approval concept. On the ground, staff in the city attorney's office is in constant contact and coordination as questions from the public or from prospective applicants come in, asking about, does this law apply to my project? How does it apply? And then, if an application does come in, okay, how do we process it? What are the applicable requirements? To make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and the right statutory requirements are met. So the first kind of set of bills that you saw embrace this streamlined ministerial process are accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. So, those when an application comes in, for a number of years now, there's been pretty strict rules from the state on, okay, if setbacks are this or less, and it's this amount of square feet or less, and it's in this type of zone, it's approved at the staff level. Probably 3 or 4 years ago now, it's hard to keep track these days, but SB 9 was another one that came out, which is an instance where if a lot in a single-family residential zone, property owner can come in and qualify for ministerial approval, split that lot into two, and then they would have the option of doing a 2-unit project on both lots. So where there was once one lot with one house on it, property owner could split it and do 2 houses on either. So 4 where there was 1. These other ones I listed here won't necessarily go through all of them. A couple noteworthy ones, though, is AB 2011, which was pretty noteworthy in the sense that that was the bill where you can have a project that's zoned for commercial uses, so office, retail, or parking. And if an applicant comes in with, they satisfy a whole host of site-specific and project-specific requirements, they can do a residential project in a commercial zone. Another noteworthy one is SB4, which is a new, I think it was colloquially referred to as Yes in God's Backyard. That was the one where projects owned by higher education institutions and churches could develop housing on some of their excess space if they so chose. So moving on, the next big law that impacts how cities up and down the state are reviewing and processing housing applications is the Housing Accountability Act, which has been around since the late 70s, but it's been amended frequently in recent years, and we'll go through some of those amendments here in a moment. But the legislature is very upfront with what their intent for this law was, and I put it here on the slide as the first bullet. And the second bullet in recent years has become pretty key because it includes guidance. It's an interpretive gloss, so to speak, for courts and judges to interpret the statute in a manner that affords the fullest possible weight to the interest of and the approval and provision of housing. So in instances where reasonable minds can differ or there's 2 good faith arguments on either side about how to interpret a statute, the legislature has instructed courts to decide those types of disputes in favor of whatever decision would result in the approval and development of housing. The statute here, I printed it the other day, so a fairly recent data point on it. I think it's 15 pages and counting, single-spaced. So there's a lot going on in that statute, and this is by no means an exhaustive overview of what's in there, but the next couple slides here will go through some key recent amendments that have fundamentally changed how applications are reviewed. So the first one is SB 330 preliminary applications. These entered the scene just about, I guess it'll be 6 years ago in January, and they allow an applicant to freeze the development standards that apply to their project. So kind of broadly speaking, the intent of this was to insulate an applicant from they submit their application and then downstream of while their application is being processed, if development standards or new ordinances take effect and are adopted, if an applicant uses a preliminary application and timely submits their full development application, they have frozen the standards that apply to their project as those that were in place when they submitted their preliminary application to the city. And so, yeah, subject to limited exceptions, the applicable standards would be those that, if I submitted something today and then 6 months from now, regulatory landscape changed, by using a preliminary application, that applicant is able to lock in the development standards that would apply to their project. Another key component of the HAA is the limited scope of city review of projects that are consistent with objective standards. So if a project complies with objective general plan zoning and subdivision standards, the setback, open space, FAR, lot coverage, height, and so forth, if all that checks out and they comply with all the objective standards, the HAA requires that project be approved unless the city can make specific adverse impact findings. And those findings are listed here on the slide. I won't read all of it verbatim, but it's a very high bar that the state has set. So that if a project is consistent with objective standards, it functionally prevents cities and counties throughout the state from denying housing applications or conditioning approval at a lower density. And another key point is, as Isaac mentioned, is a lot of these laws interact with each other. And we'll get to density bonus in a moment, but density bonus, if a project receives a waiver or a concession allowing them to be taller or allowing them to go closer to the setbacks or to provide parking below what would otherwise be required, hypothetically, for example, those inconsistencies that they get under density bonus law do not count as a basis to conclude that a project is inconsistent with objective standards. The legislature has said those are not a valid basis to say a project doesn't comply with objective standards. For all intents and purposes, those inconsistencies don't exist. So that's another big way that the state has really painted communities into a corner with projects and proposed projects that comply with standards, but then also utilize benefits that exist for affordable projects. So beyond the preliminary applications and the restriction on projects that comply with objective standards, another big part of the HAA that's been getting quite a bit of airtime up and down California recently is what is referred to as the builder's remedy. So the HAA generally includes a number of protections that specifically apply to qualifying affordable housing projects. And among these is the builder's remedy. And this only applies when a local agency does not have a certified housing element. So before January 1 of 2025, you'll see in the slide here, I write pre-AB 1893. That's the bill that we'll go into on the next slide. But before that bill, so 2024 and backwards looking, the builder's remedy generally prohibited local agencies from denying a qualifying affordable housing project on the basis of it being inconsistent with the zoning code or the general plan. And to qualify under the old rules, a project had to include at least 20% of units for low-income households or 100% of units for moderate-income households. And there were very few clear rules, a lot of ambiguities in the statute, and there were a lot of agreements. If you Google builder's remedy, you'll get a lot of articles. There were a lot of disagreements in NorCal, SoCal, everywhere on how to interpret the builder's remedy, how to process applications, what development standards applied. The statute, I think everyone would agree, was far from clear on that. And some disagreements went to court. And as I noted a few slides ago, with that interpretive gloss in the HAA on if there's an ambiguity, judges are instructed to resolve that in favor of an applicant proposing housing. Trial courts throughout the state have generally resolved disputes in favor of that, of an applicant proposing housing, and commonly those judges' decisions will cite that provision that instructs them to interpret the HAA broadly. So fast forward to I guess about a year ago, almost exactly, a new bill went online, the first of last year, that made a number of clarifying changes to builder's remedy. So put a number of the key ones here on the slides. I think big picture things to note is that they lowered the amount of affordable units that a project needed to provide to qualify. So previously it was 20% low or 100% moderate income. Now, a project can qualify with as little as 7% of units for extremely low-income households. And again, this still only applies when the housing element is out of compliance. So if you have a certified housing element, it is not in the cards. It's only if it's out of compliance. The legislature also clarified that builder's remedy projects can use density bonus law, and they qualify for the suite of benefits that law provides that we'll get to in a moment. But that was a point of contention in some communities on how density bonus law interacted with builder's remedy, and the legislature said an applicant can use both. The legislature also clarified that local agencies can apply objective standards, but those standards can't render a project infeasible or physically preclude a project, including any density bonus or incentive and concessions and waivers that the project would get. Cities also can't require legislative amendments for these projects. And this last bullet is especially interesting. I myself have not seen anything quite like it in state law to date for housing applications, but I mentioned the preliminary application and it freezing development standards. So the updated version of the HAA on this topic says if an applicant submitted a preliminary application before the law changed as of January 1, 2025, the applicant gets to choose whether they are subject to the old rules or the new rules or some of the old rules and some of the new rules or all of the new rules. It's a very unique provision of the new law. Again, it only applies to applicants that this all happened in the past. A new applicant can't take advantage of this now, but for applicants that have preliminary applications submitted before the 1st, 2025, that is an option for them. So, moving on, we are now going to touch on density bonus, and I think at its core, density bonus is a reward or a benefit that the statute provides to developers that agree to include a qualifying amount of affordable housing in their project. And so, for example here, I'll just give a very simple one. Say local zoning, based on the site and the applicable objective standards, restricted a project to 100 units. So under the local general plan and zoning, you could provide 100 units, and that's where the maximum was on the site. Well, with state density bonus law, if a developer includes 5% very low-income units, that would qualify them for a 20% density bonus, meaning they could build 120 units instead of the 100 that local regulations would limit them to. And I don't have it with me at the moment, but the statute literally has charts in it, and so you kind of have to connect the amount of affordable units, what category, and then that will tell you then what density bonus would apply to that hypothetical affordability mix. So, for instance, if a project provided 15%, so if 15 of those 100 units were affordable to very low-income households, then the statute would provide them with an up to 50% density bonus. So they could build 150 units, where local regulations would otherwise limit them to 100. A developer doesn't have to take all of it, so they could say, for whatever reason, I want to take less of that. Some developers also provide the qualifying amount of affordable housing and choose not to build more units, but they provide that housing for some of the other regulatory benefits that we'll go through here with respect to being excused from development standards. Also, local inclusionary ordinances apply to this. So any amount of affordable units that a local inclusionary ordinance would require a developer to provide and build, you would count those for purposes of whether they qualify for a density bonus. So hypothetically, if a local inclusionary ordinance required 10% of units to be affordable to very low-income households, under the statute, that would get them a 32.5% density bonus. So by complying with the inclusionary ordinance, they would have the option of also taking advantage of density bonus and building more units if the developer chose. To qualify also, in addition to the quantity of units, they do need to be deed restricted. And typically, the requirement is between 45 and 55 years that the affordable units that were used to qualify for the density bonus have to remain affordable to those families and households. So beyond the density bonus itself, the ability to build more units, there are opportunities that the statute gives developer to be excused from complying with development standards. And so the most common are referred to as incentive or concessions. For reasons that are beyond me, the statute uses those terms interchangeably, but they're synonymous. And they generally are reductions or modifications in development standards or zoning code requirements that result in cost reductions for the applicant. And the law presumes that any requested concession or incentive would, if the developer says, hello, not landscaping the parking area or not providing this amount of open space, that will save me money. The law requires the cities to presume that it will actually result in cost reductions. And we'll get into this on a couple slides from now, but if a city wants to say no, it actually won't, then the statute puts the onus on the city to show their work, as our math teachers would say, and explain and show why a requested incentive or concession doesn't result in cost reductions. In my experience, that's pretty uncommon. I mean, most things conceptually, by not doing something, generally does save the developer money. So those are one of the more popular reasons why a developer would pursue density bonus law, even if they chose not to build more units, would be to qualify for incentives and concessions. And like the density bonus, the quantity of concessions or incentives, it depends on the amount of affordable units. So generally speaking, the more affordable units that are included in a project results in a greater number of incentives or concessions that a developer could ask for. And not to be confused with concessions or incentives, there's also what are referred to as waivers or reductions in development standards. And so these are a little different. Incentives and concessions are something that a developer could say, hey, I'm requesting relief from this standard because doing so will result in cost reductions and save me money for my project. A waiver or reduction in development standards comes into play when a developer designs their project, including as many bonus units as they choose to build, and they Are you good? Okay, yeah. So this comes into play where they would say, hey, my project will not fit on the lot if these standards apply. So an easy or common example would be, okay, I can build 100 units under base zoning. I qualified for a 20% density bonus, so now I can build 20 more units. So my 120 unit project needs relief from the height standard so I can fit it. That's a pretty common one that comes into play. Setbacks also come up, open space. The quantity of waivers or reductions a project can receive those don't interact with the concessions or incentives. The project is designed by the developer with the density bonus units, with the concessions they want to ask for, and then they can ask for waivers if the box of what they're proposing doesn't fit on the lot. And under case law out of the city of Berkeley, courts have held that cities can't require an applicant to strip the project of amenities. So I think in that case, someone was like, well, hey, if the applicant removes their interior courtyard, they could comply with our standards to do this, that, and the other. And the court said, nope, the cities throughout the state have to take the project as it comes to them from the developer. You can't require them to take out amenities. You can't condition approval on them redesigning the project to eliminate the need for a waiver. This was a pretty foundational case from about 14 years ago that really added some teeth to what waivers can do. So there are certain instances where cities and counties can deny a requested incentive or concession or a waiver. Probably is going to come to no surprise at this point in my presentation. They are very limited in fact-specific situations that the state says that's okay. So for a concession or incentive, you can deny a waiver, or you can deny a concession or incentive if it does not result in actual cost reductions. So again, the onus would be on a city or a county to prove whether that was through some sort of study or kind of hard to come up with in a hypothetical, but if something really would not result in savings for the developer, that is a basis that a city can say no. Also, kind of like the HAA that we just talked about, a city can say no to an incentive or concession or a waiver if it would have a specific adverse impact on public health or safety or a historic resource, or if granting the incentive or concession or waiver would violate state or federal law. I think on that last one, an example I commonly give is, say you have an airport and there's FAA flight rules and federal regulations on how tall a building can be in a flight path for a plane. That would be an instance where if someone wanted to build a building that was too tall, a city could say, hey, look, per federal regulations, you can't exceed this height. So we can't let you go any taller because if we did, we would violate federal law. So that is an area that, again, it's very fact and property specific, but that is an opportunity in an instance where state law lets communities or cities and counties deny requested incentive or concession. It's also an area where, candidly, communities do need to be careful, because if there's a good faith disagreement and the local agency denies a concession or incentive or a waiver, the statute says and instructs the judge to award the applicant their attorney's fees. The city would have to pay. So it is the deck is not stacked in favor of denying these. It's stacked in favor of compelling communities to provide these. And finally, on the density bonus topic, in addition to everything else I have just gone over, there is an opportunity here for an applicant to request a reduced parking ratio. So again, this depends on what the applicant's proposing, how many bedrooms are in their model, how many bedrooms are in however many units. So it is very fact specific, but hypothetically, if our 100-unit example, if they were all studio or one-bedroom units, the most amount of parking that the city could require if the applicant requested, including disabled spaces and guest spaces, would be one space per unit. So it'd be 100 spaces. These are also optional. An applicant doesn't have to ask for these. And in a number of situations lately, especially more urbanized areas, I personally have been seeing applicants voluntarily provide more parking because they know the market demands that, and residents there will want a place to park their vehicles. So again, if an applicant doesn't request this and they want to provide more parking, they're totally free to do so. But in instances where they do want a reduced parking requirement, if they qualify under density bonus, that is another tool in their toolbox, if you will, for parking and providing parking for their project. Okay, so we were out of the density bonus topic. And these next ones are miscellaneous topics that I wanted to hit here, that are worth being aware of as they frequently come up. This first one is from SB 330. It's a general prohibition on downzoning and reducing residential development capacity. So this particular law applies on any piece of property where housing is an allowed use, and it prohibits cities and counties from reducing the general plan and zoning densities and development standards below what was in effect and what was allowed as of January 1st, 2018. So if as of January 1st, 2018, allowable density on a site was 30 dwelling units an acre, this would prevent a city from legislatively reducing the density on that site unless, my next slide here, the city concurrently changes and upzones somewhere else. So in that example of where 30 dwelling units in an acre were allowed, here you couldn't downzone there unless you upzoned somewhere else to show that there wasn't any loss in residential development capacity. It's just the capacity shifted somewhere else. And the meaning of concurrently depends on what's being proposed. So if an applicant for a housing project is requesting rezoning that would result in a downzoning, then the city has up to 180 days after that to find other zoning and upzone somewhere else to make sure there wasn't lost capacity. If, say, for instance, there was a drive-through that was being proposed on a site that was residential, and they were rezoning to go from residential to commercial, concurrently means at the same meeting. So if it's not a housing project and the downzone is happening, at that same meeting, the upzone needs to happen so there isn't lost capacity. These next couple slides will specifically relate to housing element inventory sites. So every housing element has to identify sufficient sites to accommodate RHNA. And in the city's current housing element, the sites inventory is provided in Section 5 of the technical appendix. And under state law, a project qualifies for by right approval if it satisfies applicable objective standards, includes at least 20% of units for lower income households, and is located on an inventory site that is any of the following three sub-bullets there. So again, it's important to note that the qualifying amount of affordable housing has to be present. So just because the development's proposed on a RHNA site doesn't necessarily mean they qualify for by right approval. The 20% of low-income units has to be part of the project. And if it's not, then by right approval is not on the table. By right approval, similar, functionally, it's near identical to the streamlined ministerial approval. So it's a non-discretionary, CEQA-exempt city review that would apply if a project includes a qualifying amount of affordable housing and complies with applicable objective standards. The other thing worth noting, again, this is just about housing element inventory sites, is there's an ongoing no net loss requirement that is separate from the other no net loss requirement I just described. That applies on all property where housing is allowed use. This one applies just specific to housing element sites inventory, RHNA sites. There's a couple requirements there that are important to note. The first bullet deals with legislative actions. So if a city or a county reduces the allowable density on an inventory site parcel, at the time of that action, the city would need to find that reduction is consistent with the general plan and that the remaining sites in the inventory can accommodate the remaining RHNA for the planning period by income level. So, and that actually has to include like a quantification of, okay, this site was planned for this many units at these income levels, inclusive of this reduction. Is there enough capacity elsewhere with our buffer and so forth to still accommodate the unmet RHNA? And if the city can't make those findings, then before or concurrently with the action to rezone that site, the city would need to upzone somewhere else or find new sites to ensure that the sites inventory could still accommodate RHNA. The other item here comes at the time of when a project comes before a city for approval. So the sites inventory includes estimates on what theoretically a site could accommodate with existing zoning, but no one really knows what the property owner, if they're going to want to develop, and if they do, what they're going to want to develop on there. The property owner, as always, retains discretion to propose a project that they want to develop. So commonly what happens is projects do not include enough, or not enough, but it doesn't include the estimate and the site and the housing element and what a developer proposes. They don't necessarily line up. They may come in with fewer units by certain income categories. They may want to do a commercial project there. Really, there's all sorts of scenarios that hypothetically could come up. But in an instance where a city approves a project on an inventory site, and at the time of approval, if there aren't enough, or if there are fewer units rather than the housing element planned for that site, then the city needs to make a finding at that time whether, okay, based on this approval with this many units by income category, are the remaining sites, even though hypothetically we planned for more here, even though it came in less, are the remaining sites sufficient to absorb the remaining unmet RHNA? And if the remaining sites are adequate and they can accommodate the unmet RHNA, then the job is done. But if the remaining sites are inadequate, the city then has 180 days to identify and rezone additional sites to make up the shortfall. And the legislature also recently added a provision here that says that a city cannot deny a housing project on the basis that approving it would require the city to identify and rezone additional sites. So it forbids cities and counties from saying no to someone, because if they said yes, they'd have to go out and rezone and find additional sites. The state has said that's not a permissible basis to deny a project on an inventory site. So these last few, I'll go through pretty quickly. We're in the home stretch. A rule that you'll commonly hear is the SB 335 hearing rule. This is pretty much what it sounds like. If a project's consistent with objective standards, cities and counties can't hold any more than 5 hearings on a project. So, that includes DRB, Planning Commission, City Council, any appeals. So that is something that staff in our office we're constantly keeping our eyes on to make sure that requirement is met and that it's not exceeded. And then we have a few very recent bills that I'll go through here briefly. So AB 130 was part of the budget trailer bill, where they interjected kind of at the last minute quite a bit of housing related legislation in that. And unlike your traditional legislation where the governor signs something in October and then it takes effect in January, the budget trailer bill took effect immediately. So it took effect on June 30th of this last year. And so related to housing, a few things worth noting here. It added that Permit Streamlining Act requirement for projects to be approved or denied within 60 days. It created a new CEQA exemption for discretionary infill housing projects in a shortened time frame to approve those. It also automatically deems approved any project that's not approved or denied by the applicable Permit Streamlining Act deadline. So it's really heightened the importance of monitoring deadlines and when the statute says action needs to be taken by. A couple other things here. SB 79 I thought I would mention. It's either a huge deal in communities or it doesn't enter people's radar. I think here it won't really be a big deal because it only applies in 8 heavily urbanized counties. But this is the bill that has been making quite a bit of airways throughout the state that would allow for very high residential density projects within a quarter or a half mile of certain major transit stops. But again, according to the bill's authors, this is only going to apply in LA, San Diego, Orange, Santa Clara, Alameda, Sacramento, San Francisco, and San Mateo counties. So it's a very narrow scope of urban transit counties that this bill applies to. There's also been a number of ADU bills that the governor signed a couple weeks ago. Won't go through all of them here, but seems to be something that the legislature comes back to year after year, is updating the ADU statute and making changes for what types of units need to be approved and how to process those applications. The legislature also modified there's an SB 9 bill this year that is kind of limiting the instances where projects can apply to now just be properties that were individually listed as historic resources or landmarks. So it deleted kind of a broader exclusion for projects in historic districts. The second one was a pleasant change. This one was a fairly city and county friendly bill, AB 87 and SB 92. And there it said that under density bonus law, a local agency doesn't have to grant a concession, incentive, or a waiver to a hotel, motel, or bed and breakfast type visitor serving use. So if a project is mixed use and a developer is including a hotel component and they want a waiver or a concession to facilitate their hotel, the state has said, no, we don't have to allow that. That's an instance where a city could choose to say no. AB 920 was another one that it's kind of moving the state. This one is just applying to cities or counties, the unincorporated population of 150,000 or more, but they're requiring those communities to have a centralized application portal online for applicants to be able to submit housing projects. That has slowly been, year after year, you're seeing more and more of these types of requirements, and I would be surprised by 2035 or something if that wasn't required statewide for all communities. Another bill that you don't see on here is AB 650, which was a bill that it applied in the housing element context, and it was a bill that would have required, when you're trading drafts back and forth with the state and with HCD, and you're getting comments back from HCD, it would have required HCD, if they thought that the housing element didn't comply with state law, it would have required them to cite to the specific statute and subsection that they said something didn't comply with, and then also provide the city with sample language or text of what they could have included, and if they did include that, that basically it would have told people, if you do this, you will comply. So it would have reduced a lot of the guesswork that goes back and forth with responding to HCD comments. That bill was vetoed by the governor. It passed both houses, but the governor's veto message said would have added $11 million or so to state processing costs, and that it also would have shifted responsibility to HCD to write housing elements instead of local communities. So. Kind of gives you a flavor of some of the appetite in Sacramento and some of the changes that bill was proposed by a legislator out of, I think her district was in San Mateo up in the Bay Area, and passed both houses, but was vetoed. So that was a lot, but that concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you. That was a lot. And it's hard to keep up with it all because it keeps changing. So thank you. I think it's timely that we had this conversation. So, yes, okay. Councilmember questions. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this information. I believe I was one of the council members who had expressed interest in this update. And it's a huge paradigm shift. But first, just some questions. Mm-hmm. This might be more for our city staff. I was thinking about this requirement for certain eligible projects where there has to be a 60-day timeline. I know we are often the city of Goleta. We have separate entities that are making decisions about water or sewer. So in understanding our reliance on other entities for getting things moving along, I believe if we're getting like the can and will serve letters, that's a process that happens before an application is deemed complete. Is that correct? And then then a clock starts from there? Or is there sort of ongoing interaction with other regional entities.
So, Mayor and City Council, first off, I'd like to just thank our City Attorney's Office and BBK for all of the amazing advice that they give us. We couldn't do it without them. You can see what a dense forest of legislation it is that we have to wade through. And as you commented, Councilmember Smith, it really is a paradigm shift, a total change from the local government authority over land use planning that we historically have had. So we really couldn't do it without BBK's engagement, and we look to them routinely for their input. As to your specific question, the Permit Streamlining Act, as you heard, has been extended now to ministerial projects under, is it AB 130 or SB 1893, so just recently. And the specific requirements for can and will serve letters, so there's usually a two-step process. Usually, initially, we get a letter of water service availability, which is a submittal requirement. So we require that in order for an application to get in the door, that we have that initial indication that there is available water. And then the second step, the requirement for a can and will serve letter is usually a post-approval condition requirement that has to be obtained before either building permit issuance or certificate of occupancy. So we can either, for that particular set of requirements, we can front load the permit process, which we seek to do. So we seek to get as much information up front so that we're not caught in a squeeze in that 60-day period. And alternatively, for certain requirements, we can make those conditions of approval. So the condition is in place at the time of approval of the permit, but then the satisfaction of that condition is tied to a different time frame, such as, again, building permit issuance or certificate of occupancy, and essentially we load that on the back end. This is a challenge, though, and it underlines the state legislatures, I think, that a little bit of a split in their good intentions and then the actual effects on the ground. And there is a certain irony here, because the state legislature is clearly trying to address the housing crisis by deregulating at the local government level. But the irony is that they're attempting to deregulate with a lot more regulation that is not necessarily transparent or easy to wade our way through. And that's especially true when it comes to extending Permit Streamlining Act to ministerial projects, which creates a whole new layer of regulation where for projects that are subject to the Permit Streamlining Act, we have to go through a 30-day completeness determination review and make a determination, a formal determination, and send out a letter, draft and send out a letter as to whether an application is complete or not. And very aware that once we don't respond, it can be deemed approved. So bottom line, this is a real challenge for us, and it doesn't necessarily make the process easier or more streamlined for ministerial projects, which was the state legislature's presumed intent. Anyway, I could keep going, but this is fascinating for us, and you get a kind of a window into the complexity of the permitting process and what it is that local governments now have to deal with. I don't know how cities that are smaller than the city of Goleta deal with this, because you really need a pretty deep bench in a city attorney's office and in a planning department in order to address this. And I do want to also acknowledge our excellent planning staff. Andy Newkirk is here in the audience, our supervising planner in advanced planning division, and the current planning division both have to be really up to speed on the details and in the weeds on how these rules are applied.
Thank you for that. The other question I had is sort of about in our last, housing element and RHNA process, and as each year when we review it, right, we talk about like certain numbers and credit that we've been given for certain parcels for like the, an estimated amount of units that could go in a certain place. And just to clarify, when those numbers are referred to, those numbers are sort of referring to our local zoning and not factoring in like state density bonus or any other state factors. Is that correct?
Generally, yes.
Okay.
So At the time that the housing element was adopted and then certified, HCD said that the way that we inventoried and accounted for our available residential land use capacity satisfied our share of the regional housing need. And in most instances, that was based on the strict base zoning of the site, not taking into account a density bonus. For certain other things, for example, ADUs, they only counted, they made an estimate of available capacity for ADUs. Ditto for other laws, which Mr. Steger referred to, like AB 2011 or SB 6, that theoretically allow residential in zones that are not residentially designated, like zones that allow retail use or parking or office use as a principally permitted use. You can now build housing as of right, but we did not get credit for that capacity. So in fact, the actual number of units that can be built based on the base density plus density bonus plus some of these other laws is actually substantially greater than what was counted in the housing elements.
Thank you for that. That's helpful to understand. And yeah, and I think it can cause, and as we proceed, or as these laws are implemented, you know, certainly has potential for confusion by the public. Like, oh, you know, this property's zoned commercial, or, you know, and I think it's back to that sort of, you know, the trust. Of our, you know, our community sees our local regulations or our local housing element, and then, you know, these state laws come in, and that's confusing. So I appreciate all this information being shared this evening. One other quick question, it may be more just a question to go into the either, but you know, we see in a lot of this. You know, one of my concerns has been, as a community, we're really struggling with homelessness and affordable housing, and you see in this a lot of incentives for affordable housing being given through things like density bonus and so forth. And I guess I'm concerned. We know that our, you know, for people who are on a fixed income, you know, our seniors, if your only income is SSI, let's say, we have the Section 8 voucher program, which theoretically you could take to different market rate units, has some real limitations and can be very difficult to use in reality. A lot of the rents in our community are so high that those units aren't eligible to even participate in the voucher program. So I know as we try to address our homelessness challenge, the deed restricted housing is the gold, and not only to address current homelessness, but to prevent future homelessness. What I'm seeing in a lot of this is sort of through these zoning and planning rules, trying to create incentives for the affordability. But what I haven't seen more, I guess. Obviously, there's a lot of complexities with things like the state budget, but I guess at a big, high level, I guess I'm not hearing as much about funding for funding or the financing piece on the deed restricted side. And if you look at past housing elements for jurisdictions statewide, all jurisdictions are not meeting the needs for the deed-restricted affordable housing. So I guess I'm just sort of, I don't know if staff or others have any insights. As we look to, let's say, you know, in 8 years from now, and we're looking back on, okay, what's going to actually happen, I have some concerns about being sort of in the same place where we're still, you know, lacking the deed-restricted affordable housing to try to address the crisis. So I don't know if there's any, you know, more discussions about funding or financing on the affordable side to sort of go along with some of the zoning or planning changes?
Councilmember Smith and Mayor Perotti, I can address that since it's really a policy observation and a very astute one. The state has not commensurately added funding for affordable housing that would allow us to develop, for example, 100% affordable housing projects. The policy approach that you heard about tonight is really a supply side one. And it deals fundamentally, first and foremost, with market rate units. So it seeks to address the housing crisis by providing more market rate housing, and it seeks to do so by lowering regulatory barriers to the development of housing. And then secondarily, there are these threshold requirements for developers to avail themselves of streamlined permitting like SB 330 that require a minimum threshold of deed-restricted affordable housing. So we do get some small additional amount of deed-restricted affordable housing from those projects. And of course, the city has inclusionary requirements that require overall 20% of units for any project that's not exempt to be deed restricted. So we do get a trickle of that, what you term the gold standard of deed restricted affordable housing, which really is, what people who qualify really need. And whether or not the state's program of trying to flood the market with supply will actually deliver affordable housing or not remains to be seen. There are many other factors at play as to what price housing ultimately is delivered at. One base level factor is just the cost of other inputs of materials, land, and labor to develop housing, and that may ultimately set a floor regardless of how much theoretical supply can be created through zoning or through deregulation. The market, private sector market participants may never actually deliver housing below a certain threshold if they can't derive a profit from that. And so, base level inflation in the economy may ultimately affect that. But it is a fascinating question and one that we're going to see. One thing that we do, that each jurisdiction is required to do, that is important to note, is we report annually to the state on our progress toward meeting our housing quotas. And there are consequences to jurisdictions that don't keep pace with the development of housing. Even though local governments are not responsible for the development of housing, all we're responsible for is the zoning of the land. Nonetheless, if the market doesn't keep pace with our RHNA quota, then different impacts kick in, or consequences kick in under SB 35 in particular, where the threshold for development decreases, and you essentially get very streamlined ministerial permitting of certain projects. So we do our best to facilitate staying on track, and we do report that, and that's available on the city's website, and through our hearing process. Anybody can see that. Comes to council annually. It comes to our planning commission annually. Anybody can track and see how we're doing on that front. And we do get to count all of the units that are actually constructed, whether or not they were planned for in our housing element. So for example, if we get additional ADUs or we get housing developed in zones that are not residentially designated, then we still get to count those actual units toward meeting our share of our regional housing need.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you to our attorney team and to our staff for sharing all that information. I'm sure we could all go on or have comments in perpetuity, but I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. I'll echo my appreciation for this presentation. I think what's clear is how challenging this is, because it is a moving target with every legislative session. And where we were two and a half years ago, adopting our housing element, we understood the laws that were in place at that time, and that all keeps changing, and it has certainly changed with each legislative session in recent years. So thank you for recapping where we are, at least now, recognizing we may be even somewhere different a year from now. And we know how long projects can take. For everyone involved, it seems like it's a challenge. So a couple questions. One, kind of picking up on what was parts of what was just responded to on the 60 days. If the city provides an incomplete letter, does that 60 days reset or not?
It
Yes.
stops. It stops.
It
Yeah.
stops?
So and then when they resubmit,
When they
a new
resubmit.
60-day
Got
starts.
it. Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that. And then I also had the same question about water and sewer. Those are definitely questions I know we've had. So I appreciate the response of kind of the intersection of that with this whole process. Another question I had was on the parking. So you mentioned that, if an applicant meets certain requirements on affordable housing, they don't have to request the reduced parking. If they do qualify for that reduced parking, do they have to kind of choose one or the other, or can they even do something in between?
Yeah, I mean, so say, just hypothetically, like we could require 100 spaces, but they could choose. So they could go down to the bottom, or they could be okay.
They could go
Well,
somewhere
we're
in
going to do a
between.
little bit more, but we don't want to do a full. I mean, it kind of that's kind of the maximum we can impose is that ratio, but they have discretion to provide as much or as little above that as they want.
Okay. And then, another question I had was this concept of if the city reduced the density on an inventory site parcel. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? So if a city did that, does the whole housing element need to be resubmitted for certification? Or is it just that piece or the pieces involved with a city wanting to do that?
So I think you would. So if density was allowed at X dwelling units per acre, and legislatively it went down, if there was sufficient capacity to make up RENA, then there wouldn't have to be a rezone to make additional sites available. If there wasn't sufficient capacity after that down zone, I think to my understanding, the whole housing element would go back to the state for them to take a look at.
So if there was sufficient capacity, is it just sufficient for the city to kind of have evidence of that? It doesn't.
It would be
need to
finding. It would be
approved
findings,
again,
and it would be
or just
findings, and the approval or the document that would be approving the legislative action that going down by this much. There's a buffer. There's sufficient capacity here to absorb the reduction here.
Got it. Okay.
I don't know,
Thank
Peter,
you.
if you had any more to add.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Councilmember, and I don't know whether we'd have to go back for recertification, but that no net loss rule applies not just to a legislative downzone, but also to approving fewer units on a site than were contemplated in the housing element. And so all I know is that we have 180 days to then find another site to upzone to or to demonstrate that we have adequate capacity to still absorb our entire share of the housing need. And it kind of implies that we would have to recertify our housing element, but I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look into that. I think generally, if you're reopening your housing element to make a different sites available, my presumption is it would likely be reviewed by the state, but we'd have to, if and when that ever came up, we'd have to.
It's new
confirm.
law, so we're all figuring this out. Maybe related to that, if a city has projects that come in that were not initially contemplated in the approval of the housing element, how did those get incorporated into the housing element?
Great question. So we get to count those again toward our RENA in our annual progress reports, and we would demonstrate that we were on pace. So
in the annual
even though they weren't planned for or not planned for at that density, we still get credit for that housing. And that would presumably, even without a housing element amendment, offset any lesser approval on another site.
Thank you. I think those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan?
Yeah, thank you. Again, I appreciate the information. So I had a few questions to clarify. The first one, so starting at the beginning of the presentation where you had the streamlined ministerial, and one of them was multifamily housing under SB 35423, which was multifamily housing. I assume it's not all multifamily housing, that there's a narrow class of multifamily housing that's going to be eligible for the streamlined approvals, ministerial approvals?
Yeah. Yes. It would be. I think as Peter was mentioning, it's tied to where you are on satisfying your RENA and your APRs and what you've been submitting to the state. But if a locality isn't making sufficient progress on a certain level of RENA, then there's different affordability thresholds where a project would have to provide, if it provided a certain minimum amount of affordable housing, it could qualify under that streamlined statute.
Okay, so this is what Mr. Emhoff was referring to. If we're not making progress, this is what kicks in as the consequence to us. It's not on the table yet, but it lurks as.
And HCD has a very user-friendly website. They have a dashboard, as they call it, where they list every city in the state, and it will say, whether they're
How
not
thoughtful.
subject to it. Yeah.
How generous of them.
Yeah, and if they are, at what level of affordability. So it's they've entered the 21st century on that.
The next one on the Housing Accountability Act. One of the things that was mentioned was the objective standards, and that, let's see, what was it? That essentially the ability to adjust things, adjust density, for instance, would only be eligible in the case of, let's see, there was a specific adverse impact or public health or safety. And this goes to the part of what Councilmember Reyes-Martin was describing, that we're going to have, even if we are hitting our no net loss on the one hand, we would have to overcome to adjust, correct me if I'm wrong, but to adjust a particular project, we would have to only be able to do that under very narrow circumstances where we could justify it in terms of health and safety. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember. That would apply at the time that the project came before the city for a decision. And yes, that's saying that it can't be conditioned at approval at a lower density unless the specific adverse impact finding was there.
Right. So currently, we wouldn't be able to say this project is, we have extra capacity here, want to reduce it there, unless we also are able to signal that there's a health and safety.
Yeah, that's correct, and that is also broader than just reducing density. So it's a horror story from another community, a case I'm aware of. In that particular instance, they at Planning Commission, a project was approved, but as a condition of approval, they lowered the height on it, and by lowering the height, the applicant was able to say that reduced the number of bedrooms that they could include in their project, and by lowering the amount of bedrooms, that was a reduction of density as defined in the HAA. So it goes beyond just a raw unit count. It's reducing the amount of physical living space as well.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask about that standard that they impose or offer, that the city cannot deny a lower density unless there's a specific adverse impact. And in essence, my question is, do they have objective standards for the safety and so forth? Can we, under what circumstances can we say that an intersection, a traffic intersection, would, by lowering increasing the congestion to a certain point, that we would have a finding that creates a, 20% increase in the likelihood of a traffic accident or, or some potential fatality. I guess my question is, do they have any sort of standards that you've seen, A, and B, is there some sort of finding that we could create? That is to say, we could do some research and say a drop in from a C to a D in terms of our standards constitutes this because of this research that's done on traffic?
It's a great question. I guess I'm not aware of any of those standards that are out there. I think another thing to keep in mind too would be, the aspect of that finding that cannot be mitigated. So I guess in the traffic example, it's like, okay, what if we
Right.
put in a roundabout or what if, you know what I mean?
Right.
They offer, pun unintended, an off ramp there for mitigation. And then I guess to your question of theoretically, I don't know. I don't know that I'm qualified to opine on traffic, but I think that, to the extent that a consultant was acquired and they looked into that, I mean, potentially. I haven't seen that before, so I can't say yes or no. I think an easy example of when maybe a specific adverse impact would be if something previously was like a toxic waste dump or something, and they wanted to build on top of it, and it was like, okay, there's no scenario where this is going to be healthy for humans to live on top of this until it's remediated. So I mean that's kind of an obvious example, but I mean that's kind of the level I think that.
No, well, let me ask this. Who are we, is it, an analyst in HCD whose approval we have to get? And depending on, whether they skipped lunch that day, we may or may not get approval. I'm particularly thinking about in our general plan. So when we had submitted our housing element, we included in it a addendum to the programmatic EIR, and that cited elements from our general plan. In particular, it cited with respect to it being consistent. It said essentially that if they can't maintain the standard levels required by the general plan, including circulation and traffic safety, and they can't achieve it through mitigation, they can't maintain it through mitigation, then there were 4 actions possible, and one of which was to reduce the size of the project in order to achieve that standard. I'm just wondering if we are able, can we make it possible that by some sort of research, some sort of analysis, some sort of preparation, so that we are empowered to be able to take that kind of action and say, consistent with the letter that we sent or the addendum we sent to our programmatic EIR, that we're going to look to reduce a project and consistent with the Housing Accountability Act, because we're relying upon this safety provision. Does that make sense?
It's a fascinating question. I think there's 2 parts of that. One on the approval from the state. I think that's I really don't feel too qualified to weigh in on whether the state would go for that or approve that. As far as how that could be used in a project-specific scenario, I'm not sure on whether. I mean, theoretically, yeah, that someone could come up with an objective standard that could be enforceable and used in that setting. I haven't seen it, and I'm not a consultant or an expert on that subject. I can't really confidently say one way or the other on that.
Yeah, it'd just be basically, can we create a finding that we can point to justify? I mean, it would actually have to really cause a deterioration in the traffic circulation. I'm not saying something just making it up.
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, I think it would be subject to the very specific factual circumstances of a given project, and we can't say in advance. What we can say is that if we approved a project at less than the density that was contemplated on that site for a housing element site, that we would have to meet the no net loss rules, and we'd have to meet the no net loss rules if we approve anything below that density. And of course, any action by the city would be subject to judicial review.
That's a separate, no net loss is a separate piece of legislation. I just want to focus on this element right now, the Housing Accountability Act requirements.
Right.
And you know, we can deal with one.
And as I understand it, the approval by the city of a particular project is not subject to HCD approval. HCD approves our housing element. However, HCD and the state attorney general have been very active in their enforcement of housing law, and we know that the attorney general is now empowered to do so under state law.
So our audience, in other words, that's clear. Our audience, in other words, is not HCD. Our audience is going to be the court. When this, because if we try and lower it and they object, they can sue us, and we can try and point to our finding, but it'll be up to the court to make that judgment. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct, council member. It would be an applicant who was displeased by a city decision, and it would move to the courts.
Okay. A few more questions. With bonus density, one thing that struck me is, well, two things. One is, and I might have missed some of this, you had talked about it before, but the effect of our inclusionary housing is the only advantage of our inclusionary housing program that we encourage them. It's an incentive for them to do bonus density, because they can count all the inclusionary against bonus density, right?
Correct. So any affordable deed-restricted units that are proposed as part of the project count both toward the density bonus minimum requirements and toward our inclusionary housing requirements that operate in parallel.
So by having that 20%, we basically just say, we're going to require this, and as a result, you get to have concessions and so forth.
So a couple things. For density bonus, you need to be 5 units or more, the project. So if you're less than that, density bonus isn't on the table. So for your smaller projects, I know there's in lieu fees, there's other ways to comply, but for a larger project, the floor to get in on density bonus, if you will, is 5%, very low income. So it's theoretically, if someone did the 2.5% extremely low and 2.5% very low, both of those being under the very low umbrella, that would open that menu of options for an applicant.
Yeah, it's just, I'm just sad, I suppose, that the effect of our, what we thought was something that would motivate to more affordable housing, and in fact, the only thing it's doing is motivating developers to propose concessions to us. Anyway, that's just me being cynical. Okay, another question is, with bonus density, where does that leave our design review board? Are they basically, does this process basically shut them out? They're doing size, bulk, and scale. They're talking about setbacks. They're talking about other things like that. And it sounds essentially like they're not really going to be players.
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, for any project that's subject to SB 330, i.e. that meets those minimum thresholds, and most of the housing projects that we're seeing come in the door are those, they're subject only to objective standards. And the city adopted objective design standards several years ago, anticipating the effects of SB 330. So to answer your question, DRB doesn't have a role. There is no subjective judgment, but we preserved as much local government authority as we could over design and design review by adopting objective design standards.
Okay.
And they're really excellent design standards. I encourage members of the public to look at them. A lot of work went into them. They're now being pointed to as a model by other jurisdictions nearby to use for similar standards elsewhere.
Congratulations. for our city manager and deputy city manager, the good news is that when we adopted potentially the use of the DRB for our arts program, they're going to have a lot more time than they used to have before. So, okay. Parking. So I gather it is not a concession, it's not a waiver, it's a right. That if under this process, the density bonus, they get to lower parking. The question I had, and I don't know if you're the person for it, and this might be, I don't know who, but are there parking development impact fees? Could we impose a development impact fee if we have some sort of finding or some sort of idea that parking is scarce either across the city or in a region, and then use that to buy parking spaces or build a parking structure or something like that? Do such a thing exist, parking diffs?
Well, I don't think I would defer to to Isaac on that. Generally, I will say we couldn't impose it on projects. You couldn't impose it as a penalty for projects that did density bonus. I think that the state's been
right.
yeah.
This would be any project that is any new project. Period would have to pay their share of pay a parking diff.
Mayor Pro Tem Kazan, I think our office can look into it. It's not something I've seen before per se, but I think there are obviously specific statutory and constitutional components associated with the development impact fee that applies broadly to a class of projects or applicants. And so it would really have to be tied to the specific sort of city impact and city services. So although it's not something I've seen before, I think our office could look into it and get back to the council if it's something that's been employed anyplace.
Yeah, well, it just seems that both the addition of more housing with a limited street space, or street space is not growing, and we already have very tight in a lot of locations, and where there's reduced parking in some of these new places, it seems like parking is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge in the future. And this might be one tool that we could use to. Along those same lines, Councilmember Smith had observed our challenges associated with getting the deed-restricted affordable housing. I believe there are some cities that have affordable housing diffs, right? That have a fee. Yes? You know about, so that we could get that money, bank it, and use it for.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Kazan, I would note. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind in regards to an affordable housing fee would be sort of, our city does have an inclusionary housing requirement in which an applicant can pay an in lieu fee that goes to like an affordable housing trust. The state also has its own mechanism, both on certain enforcement actions and certain state laws where there's a fee component that could be required and deposited in a state version of an affordable housing trust. So that is something I'm more familiar with.
So in other words, is it possible that the cities that have a affordable housing development impact fee are those that don't have an inclusionary housing program, and they just rely on funding?
Well, I should clarify, what I've seen is an in lieu fee in place of the construction of buildings as opposed to a development impact fee for affordable housing. So, I don't know if Director Imhoff is familiar with that. I don't know that I could speak to sort of the specifics of a development impact fee for affordable housing.
I would just add two things to Mr. Rosen's response. One is that the housing in lieu fee only kicks in where development on site is not feasible. So city policy and good planning principles dictate that private development provide inclusionary housing on site first, and only where there are strict findings of infeasibility can they go to an in lieu fee. The second thing I would just note is that for commercial development now, we have an in lieu fee. So new commercial development that creates new demand for housing must contribute to our housing trust fund. That's not a vast source of funding, but There is a policy basis for that, and that is in effect.
All right. I know I've heard of, at a League of California Cities thing, affordable housing development impact fee. It could be that that's what it's referring to, that it's a fee levied on commercial sites or something. Do you know? Have you heard anything?
I have nothing further to add with that. I've also heard a little bit about it, but haven't popped the hood on that, so to speak, on understanding that fee.
Okay. What is in the case of a major transit stop, in the case of the additional concessions for parking, et cetera, that's not just a bus stop?
It's a statutorily defined stop. It depends on, it can be some bus stops, but it depends on how many routes are coming through at peak commute times. You know, it's down to the minute. I think it's like every 15 minutes during certain hours in peak commute times. So not all bus stops qualify, but some do.
Do you know offhand?
Yeah, that's
We've
correct.
asked this before.
I think there's a 15-minute headway threshold requirement, and there have to be 2 lines that cross through that transit stop in order to make it qualify.
We basically don't have any, is that right?
I am not sure about that.
Okay.
But there are parking limitations that apply as a result of existing available transit.
Right.
And Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan, the Public Resource Code defines the major transit stop. That's section 21064.3. And it includes, and one of the requirements that I think you've heard both from Director Imhoff and Mr. Steger, is the intersection. One component is a requirement that the intersection be of 2 or more major bus routes with a frequency of service interval of 20 minutes or less during the morning and afternoon peak commute periods.
So it may have been reduced from 15 minutes to 20 minutes recently because it
Could
used to
be
be 15
Hollister.
minutes.
I think there are a couple of buses. There's buses, one that goes to the UCSB, and anyway, don't know. But I'm almost done. On the miscellaneous, the by right approval, it's sounded let me see if I can find it, but it sounded, one of the things was it's located on an inventory site, including if it was rezoned to accommodate lower income RENA. And it sounded like that qualified for by right approval if they have the 20%. So since all of our units are 20% inclusionary, now I don't know if the mix is identical of very low to low, et cetera, but they're also, every site in our, or I think most of the sites on our inventory are some form of lower income. Does that mean pretty much our whole inventory is by right?
I think there are some inventory sites, and Mr. Imhoff, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're only accommodating moderate income?
So the
correct?
base level inclusionary requirement includes 5% moderate income. So there wouldn't be a 1-for-1 qualification between housing inventory sites under that by right. However, the incremental difference is not that great, and projects can still get essentially not ministerial approval, but only objective standards under SB 330, so that the net effect is still the same. The process is streamlined, and the level of discretion over those projects is much reduced for any project availing itself, at least under SB 330, and probably for most housing element sites that up their affordability to meet the minimum threshold.
I will also add the 20% here. This is getting pretty technical, but it's the total units in the project. So inclusive of any density bonus units, it would be like you look at the total number of units and it's 20% of those. Under density bonus law, you're just looking at the base project. So it is requiring more. So if they did density bonus and they went bigger, at the new macro level, you'd have to hit 20% low income. So if, under the city's inclusionary 20% policy, it's not 20%. I think there's some moderate, some above, maybe workforce moderate units. So just complying with the inclusionary policy would not get someone in the by right door.
Okay, but it gets them
It gets
in
them
the
close.
doorway,
Yep.
in the foyer. All right. I guess I'll, oh, one last thing, actually. So EIRs has come up. They still have to do an EIR, even if they're doing a ministerial, or what is the, no? they
No,
don't.
it's exempt from CEQA.
For all projects under the housing element, or SB 330? Or
If they qualify for by right approval, so that the
Okay, the
20%,
by right
yeah,
approval.
that's, but if they don't qualify for by right approval, CEQA applies. And whatever CEQA process, there's a lot of scenarios that can involve including an EIR, but if they're under by right approval, the project, it's exempt from CEQA.
I see. Well. All right, I'll stop now. Oh, I did have one other, I think. Let me just, I'll stop for now.
Well, many of my questions have been asked and answered, and some that I didn't even think of. So it's been a great conversation, great opportunity for the public to hear, because we're challenged by a lot of these new regulations and laws that we didn't have in the beginning, and so so it's problematic. But I'm wondering if my one question. And I only thought about it today after reading an article about a city in Marin County, Fairfax, where the city is very unhappy with the position of the mayor and the mayor pro tem, citing, doing what legally they are supposed to do, and they feel like they should be stronger. So they're doing a recall on November the 4th of the mayor and the mayor pro tem. And so I'm wondering, are we hearing a lot about people trying to challenge some of these? I know in the past we had been unsuccessful, but is that common? I was quite surprised by what I read. actually.
Periodically, Mayor, there will be communities that do try to challenge those. I think if I had a crystal ball, the likeliest scenario, and you saw a little bit of this when SB 9 was first hitting the streets, was like a ballot measure. So I think that would be kind of something Prop 13-esque, where that I think would be the likeliest kind of a constitutional ballot measure that would potentially shift the balance of power back to the local level. But as far as like one-off challenges, those are I think. There's a case out of San Mateo where they challenged the Housing Accountability Act as they were a charter city and violating their home rule, and the court just kind of said like, no. So I think those have not been successful thus far. I think what you periodically hear rumblings about are ballot measures kind of started at the local level.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Reyes-Martin?
Thank you. I think that's a really good point. That does seem like a ballot measure is really the only avenue to attempt to rebalance the scales a little bit here from what we've seen. Maybe this is a question for my council colleagues who just attended the League of Cities conference. I mean, I know I get a lot of email from League of Cities and from other groups or coalitions of cities who raise a lot of concerns about the kind of one-size-fits-all approach that we've seen. Did it come up at League of Cities? Did you hear any more about that?
Go ahead.
I feel like not a lot, frankly. I mean, there was no formal, I don't know what the right term is.
Session?
Yeah, policy items or for cities to consider. So that was one. But and I recognize I'm the newest council member, so I have less perspective. But right? There was talk about, I think, with the fires in LA, like disasters. There was, I think, some discussions about like, how is the state legislature thinking about high fire zones? And, but from my recollection, it wasn't like a major source of a lot of the topic area discussions. So I think it maybe reflects some, I don't know if acceptance is the right word, but resignation? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you kind of queued this up. You kind of queued up something that I was going to talk about later, but when we were whenever it was, when we went to Sacramento for that trip to Sacramento to see our state legislators, one of the things we raised was essentially this question: is there a way that we can give ourselves some more flexibility to be able to, if we know there's a site that is, when we approved all of this, we had an expectation of how things would work. There would be, a project would come up, we'd evaluate the impacts of it, if we, adjust it accordingly, and that's not right. And so we brought up that idea: is there a way to adhere to the no net loss concept and reduce it in its particular site based on the circumstances and increase it in this other site? And asked our legislators what would they think about that sort of thing. And we got a couple of responses from them. Number one, they recognized, it's definitely paddling against the current, so to speak, that all of the interest in many ways is the other way, how to take away flexibility, how to strip the cities of their ability to make choices. But there were a couple of thoughts. One was, I'll rather than specify who said what, I'll just keep it general. But one of our legislators indicated that one idea we could think about that might make it more attractive. So what we're saying is, would you, legislator, make adjustments to either the no net loss or the Housing Accountability Act to pursue that kind of thing to make it possible that we could have a little more flexibility? If we've got surplus housing here, that we could use that without having some sort of either reopening the housing element or opening ourselves to litigation. Is there some way that we can respond? And so there were two basic responses. One is, let me see the language you have in mind. Let me see what it would be. How narrow is it? How broad is it? What would it look like? And the other point was, maybe it would be more attractive to the legislature if instead of saying, you want to reduce this project by 1 unit, if you had saying that we'll replace that 1 unit you want to reduce with 3 units or 2 units somewhere else. So it wasn't 1 for 1, no net loss. It was actually a net gain of additional housing would be the cost for us reducing the density somewhere else. And so basically I talked to our city attorney and said, what would, could we get some sort of sense of what that language might look like? And not to put words in his mouth, but he said, if the council wanted to see something, then we could look at it or give some sort of evaluation of the framework of what it would look like. So if there's an interest, our legislators would take it. How far they would go with it, can't say. But I think at least if it was 1 for 2 or 1 for 3 or something like that, it shows where there's, maybe it's where there's some sort of sense that it's going to be inconsistent with our general plan's transportation policy, or whatever it is, that there's something important that we want to highlight from our general plan, let's say, could we get the ability to offset it with some other, and so if I could get, some concurrence?
I would concur with that. I mean, I think, I agree that it's a Hail Mary in some ways, but I do think given all of the questions and concerns we have, that it's worth, at least bringing it to their attention, bringing some sample language, getting their feedback. It may go nowhere, but I would like to say we tried.
And I'd like just that same point, and to what you're saying with the recall sort of stuff. Even if we're faced with a insurmountable situation, we want to be able to tell our residents we're trying. We're not just doing nothing. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the feedback from the council. I think, as we move this item through any comment and then sort of wrap up items, we can speak a little bit more about that sort of feedback from the council. And I think it would probably also involve the city's legislative lobbyists who are trained in sort of that side of things, in addition to cooperation with our office and with the city team.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the public has waited long enough to have their questions answered, so I'd like to call on the public.
Sure, I do have 2 in-person speakers. For those of you on the Zoom webinar, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. Our first speaker is April Reed. Test.
One question I have, I'm still confused if SB 35 is still applicable or if it's completely superseded. If it still applies, do the sections on exceptions apply, like the property being on prime farmland or on wetlands still apply? That's my main question. So the following are changes that should be made to the statutes listed. 1, if a property was deemed to be prime farmland, developer should not be allowed to neglect or damage the property, such as allowing weeds to grow taller than a 2-story building in order to get the label taken off the property of prime farmland. 2, if a property does not provide sufficient parking for all the vehicles for a property, the owner developer should be fined for every vehicle that parks on a next door private street. I know you guys talked about that earlier today. A little, not that, but this topic. Also, someone from the city council or staff should provide the people who live on the private street with a telephone number to call when a vehicle parks on the private street. People who live on the private street should not have to spend their lives dealing with this. I do appreciate you guys talking about parking, though, and trying to resolve that issue for people who are going to be stuck having to deal with it. 3, the government said they do not evaluate undeveloped properties for flooding. If the development property next door is declared a flood zone, then the undeveloped project should be evaluated for flooding before building. As I said earlier, it's 1 to 3 feet of flooding 3 days after a project, or 1 to 3 days after the rain. So I think you guys need to take responsibility for flooding issues. 4, the height for building is already 3 stories, which is too high. It should be lowered, not increased, if that is the plan. 5, the city council should be the ones voting on development, not the staff who are not elected. 6, I think you should start passing laws on time so builder's remedy is not used. It seems like you guys talk about all these projects coming in under builder's remedy. My understanding is it's not supposed to be used unless you are not in compliance. So why are you not in compliance? And 6, there should be a new CEQA if the people were not allowed to participate in the original CEQA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Hannah Rietveld. You'll have 3 minutes if you'll make your way to the podium, please. And Madam Mayor, I am seeing no hands raised, and I have no other speaker slips for this item.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
One more question that occurred to me. I know in our strategic or general plan, we have like a development banking kind of concept. So, like a wetland bank or something where people are able to make deposits of if they do mitigation or something. And I guess I'm wondering if, I don't know, has any of that been used as part of a process that people can, that we can encourage them to reduce density in this location, but they get a credit in the development bank or something like that? Does that exist anywhere?
Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem, what you're referring to is known generically as transfer of development rights, and we do actually have policies in the general plan, excuse me, that contemplate a TDR framework. That is an item on our advanced planning to-do list to flesh that out, but it is not something that we have worked on so far. And whether or not that could apply in this context is unclear because the housing element requirements are site-specific. So in order to demonstrate that we meet the state housing law requirements and our share of the regional housing need, we have to show that we accommodate our housing need with specific reference to available capacity on certain sites. So I don't know that we could get there in a more generalized way or how a TDR program would intersect with particular densities on housing element inventory sites.
I mean, if the TDR, is that if the TDR is more than anything a legacy from another period of time, then we can toss it off the list in a sense. But if it can be made to enhance our capacity and others, if it can fit in with the current landscape, then it's exciting. Or if, maybe we need a legislative fix or something to make it a tool. But so I guess, before you invest a lot going forward in that, it was in, I think, our 2006 general plan, right? So, maybe it's still a relevant and helpful tool. Maybe it's no longer relevant. But if it could be, it's an interesting concept. Maybe now more than ever. I don't know. I would just add one other thing, since when we did the RENA process, the programmatic EIR and the zoning at certain levels and so forth, the end result was a very different outcome than what we imagined at the time. When we imagined and what we talked about was that projects essentially were going to be evaluated. The programmatic EIR was not destiny, and that we would be able to, this was my understanding at least, look at each project on its merits and make a project-level decision based on the congestion, based on all the things to ensure it's consistent with the general plan. And that is obviously not the process that we're going to be facing, and that's state law and so forth. But my plea is this: if you can think of anything that would give us any kind of tool, any kind of leverage, or any kind of pathway to ameliorate some of the negative impacts that we didn't anticipate, that we did not do when we did a programmatic EIR. There was no project-level evaluation. They were just, it's just an aggregation of how do we hit that target that will make HCD go away, so to speak. And, you know, so if you think of anything, please share, you know, because.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I would just comment that certainly as we review individual projects, we will do everything we can to assure that those projects are consistent with our general plan policy and our zoning requirements, and where we will apply CEQA where we can, if we can. But there are a lot of, I think, matters of first impression or questions that we will have to work closely with BBK on to understand kind of the limits of our authority and in our review of projects.
Right. I'm just saying, apart from project level, and maybe it is project, but any place, any broad policy, any great ideas you come up with, I'm certainly open to hearing it because, you know, with all honesty, I feel terrible that that what I told the public was wrong. What I said in the meetings, what I said, you know, what I wrote in the Independent was wrong. And, you know, I feel bad about it. I did not understand where things were going. And so if you come up with ideas, I'm open to it. Thank you.
Director Imhoff, I have a question for you to, if you could help us understand and clear up the fact of builder's remedy and being out of compliance. My understanding is it was very confusing when we were doing the housing element as far as what guidelines we were receiving from the state. There wasn't like a book, a manual that told us what to do exactly. And therefore, I think we had our housing element sent back to us twice. Could you just address that a little bit on why Ms. Reed feels like we were really out of compliance and that's why we have builder's remedy?
Yeah, so there was urgency to get to a certified housing element so that we would be past the threshold time limit for submittal of the builder's remedy projects. As it happened, we only encountered a single builder's remedy application on a single project, unlike some jurisdictions like County of Santa Barbara that faced multiple builder's remedy applications. We did comply with the required timeframes under housing element law, and we did adopt a housing element first. Now I'm going to get the timing off here, but I believe in December of 2024, we adopted our final housing element. We had actually adopted a housing element a year earlier than that, that demonstrated that we were able to meet our regional housing needs share based on existing zoning without additional rezones. So we demonstrated that we had adequate capacity. The state rejected that, sent us a letter the following March indicating that, and that essentially forced our hand and required us to then look at rezones. So we did what we could to meet state housing law and to do it within our available land use capacity. And this is essentially a circumstance of force majeure where the state overrode us and made us go to rezones. And then we had to have the difficult conversations that involved the entire community, first the Planning Commission and then before the council, about how we would address our housing need looking to rezone particular sites. And it was then following that process before the Planning Commission and the council that we were able to adopt a revised housing element that ultimately met the state requirements as viewed by the staff at the State Housing and Community Development Department, and we got that certification in hand.
Thank you. Thank you for helping understand that. Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Mayor, I did want to note just we did receive some direction from the council, and so our office will certainly work, as I said, in concert with sort of the city team and legislative lobbyists with respect to sort of what I heard this evening in terms of the concurrence from the council about no net loss and some of those provisions. In addition, I did just want to note for the record, I also heard the council with respect to questions about development impact fees and housing, and so our office will look into that as well.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. I don't know how small cities and counties deal with this, and I mean, it must be hard to get it right. We're lucky. We have a great team. Thank you so much. Okay. Are we 5-minute break? 5-minute break.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order.
And Madam Mayor, before we go to the next item, I just wanted to note for the record that Councilmember Carriaco is absent tonight, and he is out of town attending a LAFCO conference/training on the city's behalf.
Thank you.
And that's going to be item C2, approve the plans and specifications, award of contracts, and adopt categorical exemption for the citywide traffic signal upgrade project.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Nina Buelna. I'm your Public Works Director. And tonight, Public Works will be presenting on the approval of the plans and specifications, award of contract, and adopt categorical exemption for the citywide traffic signal upgrade project. Tonight, our Assistant Public Works Director, Autumn Glazer, will be presenting on this, so I'm going to pass it to her.
Thanks, Ms. Buelna. Good evening, Council, Mayor, and Council members. Tonight, the Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, is a federal aid program aimed at providing funds to states to improve safety on public roads. The main goal is to achieve significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads through the implementation of safety improvement projects. The City of Goleta received $3.1 million as part of the Cycle 10 grants selected by Caltrans in 2021. The grant will be used to improve vehicular and pedestrian safety at 32 signalized intersections throughout the city with various upgrades. In addition, we're able to provide ADA upgrades as part of this project to a few of those intersections based on funding availability. These upgrades are limited to individual intersections and do not connect our traffic signals together or improve intersection operations from a traffic perspective, but it does improve our overall safety. I will go through a few of the types of upgrades for a little bit more information on what that entails. So as you can see here on the first picture on the left, signal head replacement will be taking place at all 32 intersections. And the anticipated benefit is an approximate 15% reduction in collisions by improving signal visibility to drivers and advanced perception of the upcoming intersection during both day and night. So we currently have 8-inch signal heads, and we'll be going to a 12-inch signal head with also installing the retroflective signal head backplates, which is the yellow line you'll see around. On the right is our accessible pedestrian signal push buttons, which you've probably seen in various locations throughout the county. These are being installed or replaced at 28 intersections to better accommodate those with disabilities. On the left, 28 intersections will implement leading pedestrian intervals, which provides approximately an estimated 13% reduction in pedestrian vehicle collisions. This adjusts the pedestrian signal to give pedestrians a 3 to 7 second head start before cars are given a green. So it basically stops everybody at all directions of traffic and allows pedestrians to enter first. And this improves the driver's ability to see pedestrians within the crosswalk. And then on the right is a depiction of the decision zone, which is the yellow zone where drivers make a decision to stop or go. And that the distance of that varies based on the speed limit. And there's a lot more that goes into that. This project will install advanced dilemma zone detections at 19 of our 32 intersections with a common anticipated reduction of 40% in collisions. This includes advanced cameras which monitor a car's speed in real time as it approaches an intersection and adjusts the signal's green light duration. So it can make it go longer if they're anticipating in that dilemma zone they're going to continue on. So it alleviates the dilemma, I put that in quotations, as shown in the yellow on the screen, of whether a driver should stop or proceed during a yellow light. I will note, none of these cameras, and no cameras in the city, record. We don't keep history of videos. So those are some of the examples of the work that will take place in the project. And I do just want to note, there was a typo in the staff report. There is a 10% match requirement, and we anticipated that, and we have it budgeted, so it is covered. It's just a typo in the staff report. I wanted to clarify. With that, I've relisted the recommendations, and with that, I'll also take questions.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin?
Thank you. Maybe to clarify, so we were talking about the 32 intersections. Does that account for every intersection in the city, or is this a portion of, I don't know how many intersections we have total?
Councilmember Reyes-Martin, we have approximately 36 intersections in the city. One was just placed at for a new development near Isla Vista. I can't recall the name right now. It's escaping me. Starts with a W.
Whittier.
Whittier, that's the one. So that one will not get the replacement. So it would be 33 to the 35 signals.
So virtually everything.
And then Autumn just reminded me that signals at Project Connect are going to be removed. So those two will be removed. So that is 33 signals.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess. So, and this project is separate from the synchronizations and so forth and having them talk to each other. Does it have any extra capacity to do that?
Pro Tem Kasdan, this will not interconnect any of the signals of the city. Currently, the only interconnected signals are in Old Town on Hollister.
And that was because of the whole Project Connect to
That was so we could have the signals talk to each other and improve timing during certain hours of the day. And in real time, we can go in and change the timing of the signals. There's a future planning in the CIP that we would like to get to a point where we add signal interconnects to all of our signals. So that's something that we're looking at putting on our priorities.
Okay. Well, it must be lonely being a signal and having no other signals to talk to. Just all day, red, yellow, green, over and over again. And what was, you had a 40, what was that 40% number that you had again?
Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan, the 40% reduction in collisions is the approximate benefit that's used to calculate the safety aspect, which goes into a calculation for how much funding we receive from Caltrans. And so by adding those dilemma zone detections, there is an anticipated reduction of 40% in the collision rates.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, that's astonishing that such a relatively small amount could, it's $3 million, could have such a consequential impact.
It is really impactful what 3 to 7 seconds in cases can do and change the outcome when it comes to pedestrians and vehicles. I will add, because I forgot to mention this, going forward with this HSIP program, so I think right now we're in cycle 12, they no longer pay for the advanced dilemma zone cameras.
Really?
So we're lucky to be able to do this, even though it's a partial, it's 19, which was what we had the available funding for. It is exciting that we are able to upgrade our aged infrastructure with this.
So we were able, they don't give this money out anymore?
They give them money out. That's still a program, and we'll continue to apply for this funding, but they do not pay for the advanced dilemma zone detection going forward. So I think our cycle or the one right after were the last ones that covered this work.
And just to, Crow, what percent roughly of the cost of this project came from grants and other sources?
So it's a 10% match, and so 90% is covered by Caltrans.
90%.
That's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
I have a question as far as, will this, how do we, okay, so when there's, I'll use an example, when there's a large event, say a graduation at Dos Pueblos High School, or some really big event there, what I've seen in the past, are deputies out there at the corner of Cathedral Oaks and Glen Annie, kind of regulating the signal so that, kind of helping the flow go. Is there some way that, are they still doing that? And is there some way that we can, it seems kind of odd that they would have to do it that way. Is there another way to do it?
Mayor Perotti, that kind of speaks to that our signals aren't interconnected. And if they were interconnected in real
Then
time, if we had
be
a
able to-
traffic operations center,
Okay,
we could
got it.
actually change the timing of the signals. So I think it is an important project that we plan to add to our prioritization list.
Great.
And, we'll implement it piece by piece. It won't just be all at once.
Okay, great, that's great. Okay, do we have any public speakers?
Yes, those of you on the webinar, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I do have Hannah Riedfeld,
Hi.
and I'll speak.
Thank you for hanging in there.
waited a long time.
I'm not a night owl, so a little past my bedtime, but we made it. I'm Hannah. I'm representing MOVE Santa Barbara County. If you aren't familiar, MOVE, our purpose is to promote walking, biking, public transit countywide to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. Lainey is the Goleta. I think Barry, who was here last time, mentioned Lainey. She was unable to be here, so you have me. But also, I suspect you will meet Lainey very soon. She's wonderful. So MOVE supports the project's alternate bid inclusion of the installation of ADA accessible audible push-button activators at intersection crossings for improved ADA pedestrian safety and access. We urge the council to also incorporate the introduction of the leading pedestrian interval, or the LPI, timing cycles at all intersections with walk signals at crossings. The LPI timing is configured with the traffic signal controllers to allow pedestrians and bikers to get a head start crossing the street before the traffic signal turns green. So we recommend a 5-second advanced LPI duration, which increases safety and visibility and has become a best practice under the Vision Zero policy approach, which the city formally adopted this year, I believe. I also would like to note that the city of Santa Barbara has been implementing LPI timing cycles at intersections citywide as part of its Vision Zero strategy, including on my street, which is wonderful, and I fully support it. So MOVE supports the alternate bid, and we urge the implementation of it, and we are happy that we could be here to show support.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thanks for hanging in there.
And then she's like, I'm out of here now.
I have no other speakers
No
for this
other
item, Mayor.
speakers. Okay. Okay, back to council. Somebody want to make a motion? Are you
I'll give
ready?
it a go.
Go ahead. Councilmember
Let's
Smith.
see. So I would move that we approve the plans and specifications for the citywide traffic signal upgrade project, and award and authorize the city manager to execute a construction contract with Alfaro Communications Construction, Inc. for the citywide traffic signal upgrade project in the not-to-exceed amount of $2,607,919.86, subject to the requirements of the contract documents, and authorize the Public Works Director to approve the contract change orders for the citywide traffic signal upgrade project in the amount not to exceed $260,791.97, and authorize the city manager or designee to apply for and enter into or amend any necessary utility and service agreements associated with the citywide traffic signal upgrade project at any amount that is supported by the project budget, and award and authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Wilden Engineering, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $186,904 for construction management, inspection, public outreach, and material testing services with a December 31st, 2027 termination date, and adopt resolution number 25 next in line, entitled A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, finding that the citywide traffic signal upgrade project categorically exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to state CEQA guidelines, section 15301.
I need a second. Okay, second it. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Reyes Martin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou is absent. Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Aye.
And Mayor Prodi.
Aye. Well, ayes have it. I'm registering on mine. There it is. Oh,
Apologize for that.
There it is.
Please lock in your votes, council members.
There it is.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. Thank you. Good news. And to think we almost put that on the consent, but thanks to Mayor Pro Tem, he said, I think we need to talk about this.
Thank you for staying late for that.
Good news ended with. Okay, so any council comments or standing committee reports?
I just had a brief comment. I did attend the Cal Cities Conference. That was October 8th through 10th in Long Beach, and it was great to see, our other fellow council members from across Santa Barbara County and all across the state. So that was a great event. Also on October 17th, I attended the closing night of the Ceylon Film Festival, which features Sri Lankan, not just Sri Lankan, it certainly is highlighted, but it's an international film festival, and it's in its 4th year. So I hope, in the future that the closing night was at Direct Relief, but hopefully Goleta residents can check out that film festival in coming years. And that's it for me.
All right. Councilmember Reyes Martin?
Thank you. I had 3 council subcommittee meetings last week, and I'll have Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan if you want to add anything about the human services ones. But on Monday, the 13th, we had our Human Services Standing Committee meeting where we received updates from staff on some edits to our CDBG application process, and that was a really good discussion and appreciation to staff for looking through that process to streamline it a little bit and get ready for the city grant process as well. And there were some updates to that process and application, which I think will also help. I think it's a process that continues to, we learn from like the previous cycle and make adjustments so that we can be best prepared for the next cycle. So council will hear more about that in the spring when that timeline comes for city grants. And then we had an Economic Development and Revitalization Standing Committee meeting on Tuesday. Thank you to staff and Ms. Kern for walking us through some priority projects to look at for the rest of this fiscal year in looking at our strategic plan and some of the things that we wanted to achieve in the year that we're at now. And then on Thursday, the Human Services Standing Committee hosted a community roundtable where we invited here in this room in council chambers some Goleta nonprofit service providers to just share, to have an opportunity for them to share with us how they are being impacted by the immigration and ICE response. We also heard from them how they are impacted with federal funding threats. It was a really good discussion. I think what we found particularly valuable was for them to have the opportunity to talk with each other. A huge thank you to staff. That was a really great, and I'm sure it took a lot of effort to get everyone in the room and get it organized. And it was really a good meeting. And I think we hope to reconvene that kind of group potentially in 6 months or down the road to have another check-in. Anything you want to add?
No, I agree with everything that you said. I thought the thing that the takeaway was just how much they were there to help each other, and it was very practical. It was very much, what can we do, you know, given the circumstances that are there to make it better, to help the folks that we're trying to help, and what are the, you know, there were some great, what was Julissa's organization? Yeah, Immigrant Legal Defense offered to help review the language of different sorts of grant applications for folks to see what the requirements would be and how they changed. It was just, people were being really helpful, and I thought that was great.
Great.
So, thank you.
All right, Mr. Rosen, you have a report for us tonight.
None for me, Mayor. I think you heard quite a bit from our office this evening, so.
Yeah, it's true. All right. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.